hairdresser cried. And the redneck that I've got over here, I don't like, so we're gonna tie with one that's a little easier to tie. Let's get the light on. We'll make sure this thing gets set up right. And if this starts messing up, just scream and we'll adjust. That looks horrible, doesn't it?
Maybe better off without this.
Well, then it's white. There, that may have toned it down enough. Okay.
That.
You'll also find in some of the, Jerry may shoot me, but this is a bass fly. I don't get overly fancy in some areas, and there's some things that just don't matter. I mean, it is very heavily hackled. You'll see a few things where I'll take a look earlier. For hooks, what I'm going to tie on now is one that I had. And it's just Mustad 3411 size 2. It basically, what I do is and from a size perspective, if you go looking, and especially Texoma, shad are still the dominant forage. And those things, this is about as big as a shad gets. They don't get a whole lot bigger than that. That's another one where these big striper flies don't always do as good in Texoma as they do on, say, the bay and so forth. Because they're primarily doing the shad. And the shad start off very small when they hatch, and they get a little bigger, and you'll find stripers keying on that size.
Do you ever do those on a smaller scale?
Yeah, I don't do much smaller. But yeah, the hook to me hadn't made a lot of difference on size. So it's a lot of how long do I want to make it, and what hook do I have on me?
Gotcha.
That's where when I got to thinking afterwards about tying this, I may not have picked the best one, because this is one where I think you got a lot of flexibility in this thing. Some other patterns I tie, I'm pretty specific about what I want to do and how I want to do it. This is one where I take a lot of variation on it. When I'm starting this one, we're going to tie in V-chain for the eyes. I do like a little lighter. I don't tie it with the lead eyes on these guys. The little slower drop is more what I'm going for, and that's why the V-chain are in there. One thing that do get to steal, when you get to looking at it, I'm going to push these V-chain eyes back quite a ways from the eye. And when you tie in, whether you're using lead eyes, using V-chain, etc., you push it right up to the eye, you get kind of a jig. It'll nosedive down in a hurry. Bass often love that. And I've seen situations where cone heads or beads up there, or even the lead eyes way high, where you get that good jigging action, they'll really go after it. Sometimes that's the only thing they'll bite. But on this one, this is more, to me, it acts more like a fluke. If you've ever fished those things, where you're wanting a little bit of a slower sink, a little bit more of a calm drift down. So usually I'm fishing this up against the bank in the weeds. So push the eyes back so that I get a little more of the weight more towards the center, get more of a level drop on them. When we're tying these in, I don't know about y'all, but I use my bobbins heavily as my ruler. And where I'm going to tie it on this one is usually, for this hook, is usually about the width of that U shape on my bobbin. Is how I get to where I judge where I want to put my eyes. And somewhere I've got some V-chain eyes. Couple of, and when you've got an audience, I'm probably never going to get this on here straight. But on V-chains, I absolutely hate the things to move. And what I've found, there's a couple of things you can do to keep them from moving. First one is just a heck of a lot of thread. As far as the thread I use, I tend to use a lot of red when I'm tying bass flies. Whether it makes a difference to the fish, I seriously doubt it. But I kind of like it anyway. Just figure eight the V-chain, get it on there. The things I found with lead eyes and V-chains, really kind of two things. If you don't want them to spin, and I hate it when you're fishing the thing and then it gets loose, starts breaking out. What I found, if you put more of a thread base on here, get a good long thread base along the shank, it helps anchor it so that it doesn't spin on you. gives it something to hang on to. On this particular fly, I'm not going to be tying stuff way down at the end, so I try not to do that. I try to keep all my thread closer to the front. So the backup, whenever you don't have a lot of thread, is to glue the things. And then just a drop of super glue. And I don't have near enough thread on this right now. The key with using super glue is, and what I'll do usually on this stuff, I didn't show that very well. I'll squeeze this till I get a little bubble at the very top, then I touch that bubble to my fly. That way I don't squirt an entire tube all over my fly. Get just because it doesn't take much on there to hold it in place. And the other thing I've found is always take care of the super glue before you go back to tying. And then I'm going to go ahead and with the glue still wet, retie these goofy things. Make sure I've got them anchored down so that they don't move. The only thing to watch out for when you're doing that with super glue is don't drip your glue down your bobbin, mess up your bobbin. Again, this is a bass fly. We're going to make it put as much flash in here as we can pretty much get away with. I'm tying on a silver hook, so we're going to use this gold holographic kind of whatever you're comfortable with. I use a lot more silver with normal ones, just primarily because shad or silver. It shows up a little better, I think, on that silver hook with the gold. Again, which one works for you, and what do you have in your fly box? These are bass. We may tie silver. We're tying silver tonight. Assuming I get it loose. All right. When all else fails, just change plans and keep going, right?
Amen.
When I'm tying a mylar or tinsel body, I tie all of them the same way, which I'm going to start up front. And I don't know if y'all know if I've used this trick. If you've got your bobbin hanging down, the thread's there, you can wrap around the thread and just slide this thing up underneath the thread. And that's a whole lot easier than trying to hold this stuff in place and wrap your bobbin around on the first wrap. Then you can go ahead and put a couple of wraps to hold it in place. But that little slip it up under there is a neat little trick. When we go to wrap it, we just want to go from where it's at, just in touching wraps, all the way down to the bend, and then we're going to come back up. This is one, too. If you've got a thread base, when you don't have a thread base, especially a silver hook, you can cheat a little bit because gaps don't show. But when you've got a thread base under there, trying to keep these things touching, if you just want to make it look good, the fish don't care. That's another one with, and then when we go back, we're just going to start back over, and again, just touching wraps. And it is surprisingly easy to leave gaps, even with a double layer of this stuff. Pearlescent, the pearl stuff, if you don't like silver or gold, you can get that stuff, run just a touching base of thread up and down the shank, and that color will show through, and you'll get the nice shiny effect, and it'll match whatever the color of your thread is. Another little shortcut when you don't want to buy multiple colors of material. But all I'm doing, pretty much just, I'm primarily wrapping with my right hand so that I can guide where I'm laying that. And if it ever messes up, just start over. But if you need to stop, put your finger on it and it will stay put. Don't ever let go of it without putting some pressure, you're in trouble. But this is one where, the other hand's basically just grabbing it, and I'm using my right hand to really guide where I'm laying this. And then when we get to the front, I'm just going to go ahead and tie this off. I tend to cut this after the fact on that first tag in case I mess up and have to start over. I still have to admit, it is amazing how much more difficult it is to tie with a bunch of y'all watching. Let's talk about deer hair, and that's what we're going to use bucktail for the main body on this. When you get into a bucktail, let's see if we can get to where you can see this stuff. Bucktail, for the most part, is pretty solid. Up closer to the tip, you'll find is the stuff that's kind of the most solid. And if you're wanting a streamer-like fly, which what we've got here, where we're wanting it to pretty much stay straight, closer to the tip, it's more likely to lay straight. As you get more down into the body down here, or down towards the body, it's more likely to flare out. So depending on what fly you want, now it's not going to flare like body hair. You're not going to get spinning. But up closer to the tip is more likely to stay in nice and tight, and closer down to the body will come out more on it. The other thing you're looking for in deer hair, and I'm going to send this one around. Wow, that looks orange. If you look at this one, and I'm going to send this white one with it, you can see this crinkly look to this hair. This stuff's going to flare out more. It's going to give a fuller body look to a fly. This version on this white, you'll see is much straighter, smoother hair. That's going to lay in tighter. So when you're looking at bucktail, you can kind of take a look at the hair and get a feel for what kind of flies you want to use this for. If you're looking for a big bushy fly, or we wanting something real tapered, and we'll send those around so you can get a feel for what that looks like. I pretty much tie all of these on top. And we're going to start with a smaller group of bucktail as the very first base. And this one, if y'all caught Charlie Craven's thing when he was here last year, and I think he did it with body hair, but it's a pretty neat trick. Cut it off, grab the tips, and hang on tight, and then pull the heck out of it, and just pull as much out of there as you can. It gets most of that crap out of there. You don't even need to use a comb. Now deer hair, I got a little too much of the short stuff. Deer hair is kind of hard to stack, and you really don't necessarily want everything right in a row. A good way to stack deer hair, that'll kind of line it up. Those little glass cigar tubes, those are good for tossing in there. I have yet to find one of those because I don't have any desire to go buy a cigar. These monster hair stackers that seem to pop up whenever you buy an estate sale, somebody always seems to have it and nobody ever uses it. This thing is perfect. You can pretty much drop them in here, have them in fairly loose, and about one hit on it, and we pretty much are ready to go. I don't use it for anything else, but for bucktail, this stuff works pretty good. And then I've pretty much got my bundle. Get it to where you can see it. As far as how far you want, it becomes a question of what size fly do you want? Are you wanting to tie a really big one, or you want to tie a shorter one? This is pretty much entirely what are you after in the end. I've even tied this same pattern on circle hooks, little bitty short things. They work just as fine. Because you're only really tying everything right up here at the front, and so everything's hanging out. So you can get a larger fly without putting a lot of bulk in it. So pick out whatever the length of fly you're wanting. I'm going to cut it off. And I'm going to tie everything behind the bee chains. So in effect, I want to try to get it the little base as close as I can there, so I've got a flat level going up to the bee chain eyes. I'm just going to catch them on one fairly, I don't know, my hand's in the way, isn't it? Catch one loose wrap to hold everything in place. Let's see if we can get out of the way and lose everything. I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing. You're out of luck on watching it. Catch it with a loose wrap, and then I'm going to put one tighter wrap so nothing gives. And on this guy, I kind of want to kind of cover the body a little bit. Before I tighten it up, I'm just going to push this thing down so that I get it spread out a little bit on that hook chain. And then go ahead and put a thread base that goes up to the bead chain eyes, and I'm going to come back. So that's just getting me a layer of hair to start with. The other thing, and you've probably seen them, I put a lot of flash in this thing. This is the, I don't know what this stuff's called. This is from Fly Tires Dungeon. They call it H2O Twist. But it's a pretty stiff one, but it shines. And what I'm going to do on this one, pull out a couple of them. I just want to put this in the actual body of the hair just to give it some extra flash. Stiffens it up a little bit too. If I can get it out of here. I don't know what everybody else, this is really long. I'm going to, I thought I had 2 strands, I don't. I still have 1 strand. We're going to go with 1 strand. This is long enough that it over and cut it in half. Now, to hang on to this stuff, I hate trying to hold on to this and tie it on. I pretty much do the same thing. I loop it around, kind of more or less match the ends up, tie that stuff in, and it's not coming out. I'll put a couple of quick wraps over it, and this one I'm going to go ahead and just kind of shorten up with the, and what I've found too, I don't know if you can see how I've just kind of pushed it. If I come in at a little bit of an angle, I get kind of a staggered cut off versus getting everything just straight across. That one I want to kind of bury inside the body, just to add some extra sparkle and flash inside the body. Another trick that does come from Dan Blanton, and I've found that it works on striper and smallmouth and everything else. He calls it a flash tail. But taking regular Flashabou, and if you've dealt with this stuff, it tangles and flies everywhere, but it works. Dan Blanton's pretty adamant about using regular Flashabou, not the Magnum. And if you've looked at the Magnum is quite a bit wider than this, and it's stiffer. It doesn't move as much in the water. And I agree with him after playing with this stuff. This little bitty thin stuff, it's a bit of a pain. It tangles in your fly box and it's annoying to tie with, but it works better. And I don't know, I think his opinion is it looks kind of like scales coming off the fly. But on this stuff, while the first a little stiffer, and this stuff is a little sparklier to me, I'm keeping it in the body. I'm going to throw several of these, and these will actually hang out significantly past the body. The one I passed around earlier did not have this. But this is another one. Just grab 3 or 4 of them. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. Got a short one. And the other one, if you start with your thread a little closer to the eyes whenever you loop this one in, gives you a little more room to wrap back to the starting point. You do want to be careful and hold them up. Make sure you keep them on top, because otherwise you get this sparkly stuff sticking out the sides. And I'm just going to leave that hanging. We'll touch it on, we'll deal with it a little later. At this point, you got some choices. You can put a fairly heavy set of hair and finish the top out. If you want to do a layer of white, a layer of yellow, whatever works for you, whatever you want, you've got a shot at doing it. But this one I'm going to put a little, I'm going to do a heavier stack of the bucktail at this point. We'll see what I end up with. And we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and grab the tips and just pull anything that comes loose I don't want in there. Then when you look at what you get, we still have a few short ones if you grab too far down, but it clears out all that under fur and everything else. Works for belly hair. And again, that's Charlie Craven, when he was here last year, was talking about that. It works. And it stuff stacks so much better. It has surprised me. It works better than better than sitting there combing the heck out of it, then beating on the hair for half an hour. You'll see some people doing it. You pretty much just hit it once and it's close enough. You can take bucktail. It is also, you can do this by hand on evening them up. It works just as well. And I'm pretty much going to line him up, just match what the other body that I've got in here, and we'll put it in there. So again, just kind of figure out what the length is, where am I at the bead chains. And just cut it off. When I come in, I don't know whether we can see it, but we'll catch a fairly loose wrap to get a hold of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a couple more tight ones on it. That's hard to see. I do go ahead and, this is not a fly where I'm worried about having bulk in here. So I will go ahead and run the thread up and down here to get me a nice flat area right in here. The next part, I don't know that the fish care, but I think they look cool. Grabbing a little grizzly hackle, one on each side, adds a nice scale look to it. This is where, all those nice Chinese nets that you don't know what to do with, time to go grab them and use them. They're perfect for this. So you just want to grab a couple that are roughly the same. Get a general feel for how long you want it. And I'm just going to strip the stuff off. If you've got one that likes to roll on you, or you can't get it to lay flat, instead of stripping it off, let me make sure I get it about the right size. You can also pull the stuff so we can get to it. Instead of stripping everything down to the shank, come in, and just leave the little barbs on it. You can see that. Gives it something to hang on to. It doesn't roll as bad. You can catch it. If you ever get to playing with jungle cock, that is the way to get that stuff to finally go on. But then I'm just going to use the other one for this side. I'm going to lay it on here. Again, this is where you're not too worried about making it pretty as much as just trying to get it to lay in the right place. A loose wrap, a couple other wraps just to hang on to it, and then look and see if it did what this one just did, which is roll. And if it did, take it off and start over. And all we're trying to do is get this one to just lay along the deer hair, or bucktail rather. The other one, we're just going to take it, a fat one. This desk is higher than I'm used to tying on. That's my excuse, yeah. We're just going to tie it in. Again, both of these have rolled on me. Since I'm supposed to be showing you how to do it, I should at least try to make it right, shouldn't I? Another one that if you haven't been tying very long, if you get to watching me, sometimes you've got to pull a lot of thread down, and you've got a whole lot between there and the bobbin. It's hard to control this and get it in nice and tight. I like to keep it up here pretty much as tight as I can. I've got a lot more control over the thread. I can lay it down where it needs to be. I can control where I want that thread to lay. Learning to keep that pretty close really gives you a lot more control over over your thread and over your tying. And it's kind of the same principle. I'm just going to lay it up so I get that even thread base. And he's still crooked, but at this point I think y'all probably want me to move on. Okay. At this point we're going to switch over and we're going to put a hackle on here. And what I'm after again with this, I want to move some water. It's a bass. I'm not worried about, so I'm not really going to use really a wet hackle. I'm going to go ahead and grab a dry fly hackle or a rooster hackle. A little bit stiffer, just so we push a little bit of water. Have you gotten the basic theory? We got all kinds of flash in here, and we've got some bulk in here. We're going after bass with this thing. When we start talking about hackles, you go and look at feathers.
Do you typically put another clump of deer hair underneath on the bottom side?
No, I don't.
Okay, just two on the side.
Yeah, and you can see this one where I've made it a lot heavier on this one. That's dressed a lot heavier. I've gotten to where I don't dress them quite as heavy as this, but really that first one, if you use a heavier hackle or heavier clump at the first, you'll fill in more. So it kind of becomes with what profile are you after? And then I like a little thinner than what I did at that point. It seemed like I had better luck with it. But that is entirely, and you'd want to do it before we put the grizzly on the side, but you can add more. You can stack as many as you want. If you get it on here, you look at it and you think he's a little skinny, just add another clump. And that's a whole lot easier than taking it off if you decide it's too much. See if I can figure out how to explain this. When we're talking feathers, and some of you I know this, but this is a fairly typical saddle hackle. And when you get to looking at it, you start off up close to the body, you get all that fluffiness that we generally just rip off and get rid of. And when you get to further up on the feather, we come to a very small, not a whole lot up there. The sweet spot on a feather is really this section right in here, where it's nice and consistent. As you wrap it through here right in the middle, it's all the same size. So you get a nice consistent look to it. When you start getting on where we start tapering up, that's going to flare out on you. If you start wrapping here, it's going to get bigger as you go. Now on like a woolly booger, that's a lot of times you want that because you can get a nice tapered profile on a feather. If you're wanting something, and this one really you can do it either way, but if you want it to come out looking more consistent across there, what you're after is that little sweet spot where it's all nice and consistent. The difference in saddles and capes or necks, is generally length. And I don't know how to show this, so we'll just talk about it. But when we're talking about it, and this may be on the back side, these saddles tend to have that sweet spot can be very long. And that's a good example sticking across the back there, where it's very consistent. You get a lot of that size. The different saddles, capes, saddles tend to have a limited number of sizes in them. So you'll see some of them that it may tie a range of 14s to 16s predominantly. So if you're tying hundreds of dozens of 14 to 16 flies, the saddle's the way to go because you're going to get a whole lot of feathers right in that range. You can tie multiples off a feather. When you get into capes, what you'll start noticing as you get further down, they get significantly smaller. Further up, they're wider. In effect, with a cape, you get a wider range of hook sizes. With a saddle, you get more flies out of it, but it tends to be a more narrower band of flies that you can get. I will say this is one of my newer ones. It's a pro grade, and I don't know that I'm ever going to buy anything else. Look at the lengths of these feathers that they've got now. And I've got saddles that don't have feathers this long.
About what did that run?
I do not remember, and I try not to think about it. The pro grades are. It depends on where you buy them, but that is the whiting on the red label version. These are. You don't get as many flies, but when you look at the quality of the feathers this guy has gotten these chickens to, it's not really worth. To me, I don't tie enough flies to do something else. I'm going to use this one because it behaves whenever I tie with it. The red one I have to fight, and I don't want to do that tonight. Again, we're tying for bass flies, so what we're after, I'm wanting to see what I can clean up here. Exactly, what size you want with trout flies, and when we're really dry flies is where it matters. You want to watch your proportions so that they'll float right. We don't care. This thing's going to sink, and what I'm after is really just a profile that comes out well to me. So it's pretty much a little bit of what do you want? Where are you planning on fishing? What do you think they're going to take? How are we doing on time? We're doing fairly well.
Only 6 o'clock. You're good.
We got a lot of time. When we're dealing with hackles, if you'll pull off some of it, and I want to get, and you can kind of see this guy with what I've got, what I'm talking about here. Right about where this is starting to flare out, to about where it starts getting wide, and then it gets really, really bad further up. So right in there is where it's going to be the most consistent. So if I come on in, and I'm just going to go ahead and so I know pretty much where to stop. You've got a couple of choices here also. And a lot of what I've got a cheap neck that's pretty short that is red, and that's kind of what I've been fishing. You can tie 2 or 3 feathers in here if your feathers aren't long. So if you've got them and they're short, let me show another one. While we're talking about feathers before I get deep into that. If you look at this guy, this is one of the, it's Whiting's American saddles. They're more of a dry fly or a wet fly use feather. And you look at it, that section we're talking about where we get nice and even and consistent, it doesn't really exist here. You can also see how they're wider. These are softer feathers. They make great throats and so forth. And they look really good when you tie this fly with that. But I like the stiffer feathers because I like a little more presence of the fly when I'm chasing bass. This will give you more action, the wet fly hackle will. But we've got enough stuff in the back on this fly that I'm not too worried about that with this one. So I'm going to strip off just so I know pretty much where to stop. I'm going to go up to the front and I'm going to give myself a bare spot. And this is when you're wrapping any hackle, kind of strip off some of it. That's hard to see, but get you a little bare spot in there. When I tie this on, I want to tie it so that whenever I come over, I'm going to go ahead and point the shiny side, or what I consider the top, towards the eye. That's a little bit of personal opinion, but I'm going to come in and catch that little strip that I've got, and so much for a hackle that wants to behave. And I'm going to go ahead and come back, and one thing I do want to make sure that I do is get the thread back to get that to where maybe you can see it. I want to get it back to where my thread starts. I want to basically tie that hackle in right at the very edge of the thread. Because wherever I stop my thread is where that hackle is going to be. And if I stop it in the middle, I'm going to have a gap of red thread in the back. And then I'm just going to get my thread back up to the front. Let's go and get this out of the way. This is where some of the trout guys may come in and cringe, because on this one I really don't care how pretty this is. But on this, pretty much, see if I can do this without wiping out. And the reason I just put that bare stem on there, it wraps around real easy. You get started. It's out of the way. You don't have the fibers pushing it. You start that first wrap is kind of critical to get everything started and going. And that's a trick for any time you're using this. And what I'll do is as I get to the top each time, I'll kind of just stroke back a little bit. Hackle pliers work, but what I have found is that these hackles are so blooming long that it doesn't always work for me. And I'm just going to wrap it. Hopefully y'all can't see just what a mess this looks like. I'm going to try as much as I can to get each wrap, the stem to touch the other one. I want to go ahead and make this as close as I can get to the other one. And just kind of stroke the fibers back. The ones you miss are going to be a problem as we get further in. And I'm just going to keep going all the way up to those V-chain eyes. And looks like I've got about one more wrap. And once I'm to that bare stem, you can spit on your fingers and make all this stuff lay down better. I'm going to not do that at the moment. You can get something to hold that stem in behind the V-chain eyes. And then just to make sure everything stays put, I'm going to come back in front of it. And then the next step is we're just going to get that stem on out of it. And if you want it to look really good, make sure you always keep your scissors on the other side of the thread. You can come in here and then kind of cut out some of the ones that didn't catch well. The fish don't care. And then just form your little nose up here just to make sure nothing's going to come loose. Throw a whip finish on it, and then just let it slip. On bass flies, before we do that, have you dealt with broken thread, or you want to change the color of a thread? You can do them the same way. Let's show that real fast. If you're not, we're pretty much done with this class, and now I'm just going to talk for a minute. I've already tied this one off, but just if you do break a thread, grab what's left and throw a hackle plier on there. Just cut this off, just so that you don't lose it. Get a wrap or two on there, and you can also change thread colors this way too. Come in front of that thread. I don't know if y'all can see this or not. I'm just going to start right in front of it and start that same jam hitch. Isn't that what that thing's called? And just wrap back on top of it. I can go ahead and cut the tag end off of my new thread. Get it out of the way. And then I'm just gonna wrap back on the, in this case, the red thread or on top of the broken thread. And just wrap back on top of it. Once we get far enough on, and cut that off. Clean up the rest of the head, tie it off. I do not change colors of thread on my fishing flies, but for that's kind of a neat little trick that somebody showed me. Just stop it, and then you've got the thread wrapping, and just take another, either the same thread or the other, and just start wrapping it back on top of it. It'll catch it against the hook shank, and it'll hold it all in place. That is and then the other little trick, because I butcher these things somewhere. I don't know how y'all guys like Barry and Dutch carry and Jerry over here carry their tying stuff and don't lose everything when they're tying. I tie at home most of the time.
Mine's packed in so tight it won't go anywhere.
Where did it go off the desk is the question.
What are you after?
Oh, it's a little cone thing that doesn't exist. Which means it's probably on the floor somewhere.
Look under your flash.
Flash?
Right.
Tackle pliers. Oh,
Tell us the story.
yeah, that's where I'm going. The see those little mustache combs with the little bitty comb on one side and the little brush on the other side? That brush is wonderful for cleaning up that hackle and getting it all unstuck. Just run that thing over here and it fluffs them back out and makes them look pretty. The last step on this one, I've gotten to where I use Sally Hansen's as the head finish, and I do always glue bass flies. They just take too much of an use. They're just too big to waste. Bluegill flies, I tend to throw two whip finishes on and call it good.
Wear it out 2-3 times.
Yeah, or that, or it's going to end up decorating a tree. Just be careful so I don't wipe out their table. The reason I like Sally Hansen's over regular head cement, because I have yet to use up a full thing of head cement without it drying out and getting thick and useless. And this stuff seems to last forever. One trick on this stuff, let's see if I can do it without making a mess. It just doesn't dry out as fast. So I've gotten to where I use it. The brush that comes with this thing is about 3 or 4 times too wide. And you see how that's been cut? Cut it down and it makes this thing much, much more usable. It's a whole lot easier to work with. At this point, I guess we have a choice. I can keep talking. We can talk about different hairs. We can tie another fly. We can go eat lunch. So I'm going to leave it open to y'all because obviously I can talk for the next hour.
Break time.
Break time then.
Do you trim the flash boots that you put in there?
Oh yeah.
Do you trim that on the
Short each.
What I'll do on this is kind of get a feel for just how far I want it. I did forget that. And again, I don't really want it really long, but I do leave this stuff hanging out. And Dan Blanton's opinion when he started doing this is that looks like scales or something coming off. But either way, this stuff moves extremely well and it's flashy, and it makes a difference. They do chase that way. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Rex, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rex.
How are you doing? Happy New Year. How was your holiday?
I came in,
Hi there.
came in a little late. You used the bead chain. Do you ever use
Yeah.
the lead eyes to get them